September the 4th, 1957. Looking out the window down 68th Street, there's a man approaching. Yes, he's got a blue Hawaiian print shirt on, and yes, it is. It's Jack Kerouac coming down the street, 68th Street, New York City. So Joyce Johnson runs down, meets him. They spend that day. September the 5th, 1957 is when Kerouac's On the Road is going to be released. So Joyce Johnson and Jack Kerouac spend the day together, and they wake up just before midnight, and they go down to the newsstand to get the New York Times. And they get down there just as the bundle of New York Times newspapers are thrown off the truck. Guy cuts them open, and they stand under a street light, the two of them, turn into the book review. So they look at the book review, read it, and start reading it, and they go on to a bar, and they lay it out on the bar, and they read it very carefully, line by line by line. Now, the person that wrote the New York Times book review for On the Road, the regular guy was on vacation, so there was another person that had actually written this review of On the Road. And this person that had written the On the Road, he knew about Kerouac, so he wrote this review. And so they're reading this thing line by line, and finally Jack turns to Joyce Johnson and says, "It's very good, isn't it?" And she says, "Yes, Jack, it is very, very, very good." And that's when it all started. So they went back, went to sleep, and that would be the last time that Jack Kerouac lay down in a bed, and he would be obscure, and that would be the last time for him to lay down in that bed, in a bed and be obscure. So literally the next morning the phone started ringing off the wall, and the rest is kind of, as they would say, history. That review set it off, and Jack Kerouac became very famous. And he's written a number of books. So I've got On the Road, and I've got Dharma Bums. On the Road, it was written, and he would write or type on what's called a scroll. He made this scroll, and On the Road, he just would type. He would type the main part of it in 3 weeks, the whole thing. Now it would go through some other gyrations and editorials and pluses and minuses, but basically the body there, he wrote it in 3 weeks on this scroll. The scroll still exists. It's 120 feet long, and the whole book is on that, except for the ending. And you remember the dog ate my homework? Well, the dog ate the ending off the end of this scroll, so that is gone. But anyway, 1972 for me is when I discovered Jack Kerouac, and I discovered it by reading Dharma Bums. And it was in the fall, and as I started reading it, and as I read it, and as I realize now, it was almost a biography of the last 3 years for myself. I had just come from the North Cascades, and Dharma Bum talks about him being a fire lookout, which was just to the north of where I was. So reading about his take, his view, his experience up there in the North Cascades, Pacific Northwest, I mean, I could immediately relate to it. I just came from there. And how did I get home? I got home, I hitchhiked. I started hitchhiking. And that's what he did. The minute he left, he hitchhiked. He went to the San Francisco Bay Area, hung out in San Francisco, same places that I did. He went over to Marin County, north of the Golden Gate Bridge. He went up there, and that's where I went. And so all these places that he's writing about, and talking about, and things, the house I stayed in was just a few blocks away from houses that people that he mentions in the book lived in. So it was like being in Dharma Bums, and it, to say the least, it caught my imagination, admiration, and I was hooked on Kerouac books. Now, this On the Road, I'm not a great fan of it, and the one I have right here is the scroll version. This came out a few years ago when they found the scroll, and it's the unedited version of On the Road, which is quite different from On the Road when it came out originally, and so it's a little bit different. Hello, Mr. Higgins. How are you today? Did you come to be a literary critic too? So anyway, On the Road is sort of the classic. It defined a thing called the Beat Generation, a term that Kerouac coined. And so these are the three books. Now, Joyce Johnson, Minor Characters, is a book I just discovered less than a year ago. And she was kind of his girlfriend for a while. And she writes some very interesting things here. And the thing about it, when Jack showed up on that September day, he had just come up from Orlando, Florida. And this is the thing I didn't realize, is that he was living in Orlando, Florida, in a house there. The house still exists. It's owned by a nonprofit that has a program to help writers out. But he was writing Dharma Bums at that time when he left Orlando to come up to New York, and when On the Road was released. So anyway, if you're not a fan of Kerouac, I think if you picked up these three books right here, I think you can readily be a fan of Kerouac. And, so I hope you'll delve into it. I've enjoyed it for 30, 40 years myself, and they're great reads and always give a lot of perspective on culture back then.